much for coming and joining me in this today. I really appreciate it. It's such a huge fan already of the book. It's just so wonderful.
Thank you.
And
Such a pleasure to be here talking with you.
I just gonna give you a wonderful introduction because you deserve it, and we'll go straight into the questions, which is Charlotte Fox Weber grew up in Connecticut and Paris and went to the University of Bristol where she studied English and philosophy. She did her psychotherapy training at the Tavistock and Portman Trust, the Institute of Psychoanalysis, WPF, and Regent's University. She is registered and credited by the UK Council for Psychotherapy, and she is a registered member of the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy. Charlotte founded the School of Life Psychotherapy in 2015 and now works in private practice and is co founder of Examine Life. She's also a trustee on the board of the Josef and Anni Albers Foundation. What We Want is her first book for the trade, which is an awesome book. So, Charlotte, I've got to ask, so what made you feel like this was the right time to write this book?
Oh, I mean, of course, it wasn't the right time because doing difficult things is always going to come at the exact wrong moment. So that's what made me feel I had to do it. I had this kind of agitation. I felt preoccupied by, it was almost like an irritant by this sense that I really had something to say. And that came from hearing countless stories of people revealing what they really wanted out of life, but not feeling that they were allowed to make space for their desires and longings. And I felt the same. I felt the same conflict. And I was kind of living and breathing that conflict. So I began writing the book when I had a, a young child and I was kind of 150 months pregnant with my second child. And I was full up in every sense. I could barely make space or time to do it. And that made me feel that it was absolutely the right moment.
Yeah, yeah. Oh God, that it sounded trying, especially trying to manage all the different sort of parts of your life, within the book as well. And actually, Charlotte, I wanted to ask, just off the bat of that, which is, how did you feel the fact that none of your own sort of therapists ever asked you what you desired?
I felt quite frustrated and stuck and restless. I've always been very restless. And I think impatience can sometimes be a virtue. It can definitely be problematic and I've had to learn how to be calm, and there's a lot to be said for calm presence and allowing for slowness, totally. But impatience can also be a mover and a shaker, and it kind of gave me that sense that I wanted to get a move on. I didn't want to just wait indefinitely for my life to happen. And maybe there was something about having children and then the pandemic that made me embrace that freak out of realizing that actually we have to drive our own lives. We can't just wait to arrive at meaning.
Definitely. And so, like, for you, why do you think that people are so afraid of showing what they actually desire and what they actually want? What do you think is like the biggest issue and the roadblock in terms of people kind of showing that emotion?
I think that we've been socialized to play games with desire. So in a way, it is like hide and seek, where we put on a show and we think that we'll be more likable if we act like we want certain things and we hide other longings. And we're socialized and conditioned in every culture in different ways, but certainly I don't even know what culture I'm from because in your introduction you kind of alluded to my coming from different places and even different trainings for psychotherapy. I feel like having manners requires restraint. But I guess that my frustration with therapy was that I've always seen therapy as a place for radical candor and for uncovering some of those barriers and roadblocks. So I thought that it could be a space for deep exploration and looking without hesitance at what is really going on. And I think it is that space. But I think that the therapist I saw, and it kind of in a way it's a microcosm for what goes on. There is a real kind of embarrassment around desire because it feels problematic. We don't quite know what to do with it. It feels too much.
Mm.
And there's so many reasons for that. We we fear it in ourselves if we want something that we can't have. We're afraid that we'll find out that we want something that is just unfeasible or that we'll lose whatever we care about. I mean, there's that kind of vulnerability that comes with longing.
There really is, yeah. And I always thought, so what do you think is the consequence of a unlived life?
I think there's something really tragic about an unlived life. And I think we all have fantasies of the unlived life. So it's not about shutting that down. But one of the things that I've found in my work is that we sometimes put our best selves into a kind of storage facility. And it's like big yellow storage facility where I actually sometimes can be a hoarder in every sense. And it's as if we're kind of keeping our best furniture, our favorite dishes and gems and jewels, and saving it for some other existence. And then this life, we can deprive ourselves and hold back. And you don't want everything that you care about going into storage. So I think it's really interesting, and that's where therapy can be a very creative space where these fantasies emerge of the kind of unlived life that you are longing for and dreaming of and actually counting on. And I think kind of dipping into that and taking some of those treasures and applying it to your life right now, it's a beautiful thing. I think if your unlived life is where you really have meaning, then what's happening in the life you're actually living?
Yeah, 100%. And it definitely showcased in a lot of the stories in terms of that you've brought up in your book, regarding what could happen when you don't have that fulfilling life, like the couple who were just kind of sniping at each other all the time. And I was just wondering, why do you think love is such a struggle for people? It seems to be just, we hear it in every song and we hear it everywhere where we go,
Mm.
but it seems to be just like a fundamental struggle for people to get it right, or maybe just live with it, or it seems really like a conundrum.
I'm with you. Yeah, I think it's a conflict, the way desire is a conflict. And I think that we can embrace conflict. I don't think conflict has to be a problem that we can look away from because if you think about any story, conflict is essential for a plot. You don't have a story without conflict. So conflict forms the plot of our lives, the various stories, and love is that story, desire is that story. I think if we can lean into the conflict, love is a conflict because we we have mixed feelings about closeness and about other people and differentiating ourselves. And it is an ongoing struggle. It's a very interesting paradox as well because love is both natural and it's very social. So it kind of comes instantly, but then it's really hard. And I think that we've been fed various myths about love. And one of the myths is the idea that it should just be easy. So we get ourselves into trouble if we think that love is completely straightforward.
Yeah, no, completely. And I guess that's the same, like I saw in Sing's story that you showcase as well, which is the real sort of struggle to understand yourself, and the sort of
Mm.
the self-awareness that people have. Why do you think we can't seem to pinpoint who we really are or have that understanding? It's really strange.
I think that we're in motion as long as we're living creatures. And I think that having identity crises is not a bad thing. I'm actually in favor of them. And they're uncomfortable. And I don't think that we should have a crisis at every moment. But a crisis opens up possibility and change and growth. And there are various times when it's necessary to revise our understanding of who we are and who we're becoming. And it connects to your previous question about love, that actually our definitions change, the meaning changes, and we change. So the instant love that you feel, like for a friend, for example, 20 years later, you may have some of that, but also there's a lot of growth and adjustment. And I think we have to be flexible and constantly allow for updated versions and definitions and understandings.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you touched on this before, which is it's so true. This dichotomy of shame and ego, and I'm just wondering, like, you
Mm,
were mentioning thisness, the lifelong pursuit of thisness. So, is it
mm.
egotistical for thisness, and has why has sort of ego been presented always in a very negative light?
I really would love to bring back ego as a beautiful, noble thing. Ego, our amigo.
I like that.
I think I think it's a beautiful word, ego, and it has a kind of nobility. It's not the same as
Mm,
narcissism. I think it's gotten us into trouble for one thing because it's a very badly defined term. So psychotherapists mean a lot of different things, and I won't bore you with all of the kind of arguments over what ego means, but it's the narcissism of small differences in a way. But if we just think of ego as self, which is what it comes from, like it means I in Latin, it's some sense that you are something and that you have worth. And that doesn't mean that other people don't have worth. It doesn't mean that you have endless power and can do no wrong. I mean, I think a healthy ego actually recognizes limitations, but I'm really in favor of cultivating ego strength. But it's hard because we have been conditioned to feel embarrassed, and I'm certainly no exception to that. I mean, it can be unsightly feeling. It can feel vulgar. It can feel all wrong.
yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. It's a real struggle to think so find that kind of balance between being proud of your accomplishments or really sort of understanding how well you've done, but at the same time
Mm,
balancing that with bragging and boasting.
yes,
Um,
yes,
it's a tough one.
completely. And it is, and one of the things I love about therapy when it comes to ego is that it can sometimes be a wonderful secret. And I've worked with people who have come to really enjoy their own company and feel that ego in a quiet way. They don't have to necessarily boast.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be declared from the rooftops, although if you want to, then go for it. But it can also just be a kind of quiet conversation with yourself that actually you
mm,
matter and you're pretty wonderful and
um,
you can know that.
definitely. And you know some of the stories that that you showcased in your book are just so moving and so profound and so just sometimes really quite tragic in a way, and and you do really feel for the people involved who've gone through the things that they have. And so for you, what do you think are the most sort of profound moments you've had as a therapist?
The profound moments I've had, moments of meeting, moments of deep, deep rapport and connection where it's possible to actually see something in a new light. And the people I wrote about in my book, and it's all based on real clinical material, but I have concealed
Mm,
identifying details to protect the confidentiality. But those people were very brave and courageous in some way because they
God.
were willing to let it all hang out and to allow me in and to allow therapy to do something, even if they were kind of raging, even if they were struggling. I picked stories of people who showed something in a bold way.
Yeah, because like Astrid's story, and it was just so, like it was really moving. The fact that It doesn't matter what age, it doesn't matter what gender, it doesn't matter where you are. There is just this space, isn't it? There is a place for you to be seen in therapy.
Yes, I mean, and the stories I wrote about, some of them were gut-wrenching and heartbreaking for me in real life, and yet I found I found the experiences astonishing because they were just real and true, and there is something about emotional truth that is a huge relief, even when it's painful, even when it's just unbearable. It still feels, for me, just infinitely more consoling than pretending. And so often in life, we put on a show. So there is something about being able to just confront ourselves and confront each other in a kind way, even if we're saying brutal things. The truth just feels intrinsically good in some way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And when going through, say, the list of desires that were picked, things like control, freedom, out of all the desires, which one do you think is the most sort of powerful and or maybe prevalent within like us?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't want to avoid it with a shrinky response of not really answering your question. Although I do think it depends on where we are in life because any one of those can be pernicious. I think that wanting to win is actually a really complicated longing that we all have, and it's not comfortable. And I am really interested in it because we don't talk about it that much, even though we act it out all the time. And outside of sports psychology, it doesn't even come up that much. Like in my psychotherapy training, I don't remember even really studying it. And when I was doing research on it, it's like, again, sports, I'm not particularly athletic. I mean, I'm very impressed by people who are, and congratulations, but that's not where my competitive longings play out. But I'm not alone in having those kind of complicated, unsightly feelings because I used to also pretend not to be competitive. So I would say I'm not the competitive type. Maybe not when it comes to team sports, but in other weird ways, absolutely. And I think it plays out just everywhere. I'm not alone in feeling that conflict. And when you start looking for it, it's this kind of underbelly in so many dynamics. So I think it can really get in the way of things because we don't deal with it. So of all of the desires, it's in some ways the most taboo. But I mean, attention is another one
Mm.
that we all want. We all want attention, but we're pretty bad at saying that out loud unless we're children.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. But yeah, God, you're completely right because I'm like you in terms of huge respect for sports stars who can, who are competitive, but it's just never been something, that I thought I was competitive. But then when you start looking at other aspects of your life, you realize, yeah, yeah, I can see where it's coming out. And yeah, it's
Mm,
uncomfortable. It's like really uncomfortable to think about that. Oh God, I'm not sure I like this side of myself, or, you know.
yeah, it's not totally nice. It's not sightly. And it can come into any relationship. It can come between parents and children,
Mm.
colleagues, friends, partners. Like romantic partners can be more rivalrous. And even rivalry. We think of rivalry as being about siblings, but it's not just siblings. And actually siblings are a very healthy, fluorescent way of looking
Mm.
at this issue because they as children tend to kind of play it out in a theatrical way for us, but it doesn't get resolved and it kind of pervades other areas of life.
Yeah, no, completely. And do you know, just reading through the book, I was like noticing all those different desires, and I was like, oh yeah, yeah. I've definitely feel like, I think everyone in a way goes through some aspects of it right throughout their life. And do you feel the
Mm.
same where everyone goes through every single one of those kinds of desires?
I really do. I came up with those 12 desires because they were the ones that emerged again and again. And also because I think that actually there's power in a name. So if therapy is startling in some way, in a safe enough way, I think that that kicks off a really interesting discussion and exploration. But sometimes it does need to be a little bit provocative. And putting something out there like power, how do you feel about power? We all have a relationship with power. And I don't think I'm making any great claim there. It's not some massive discovery that I, Charlotte Fox Weber, have stumbled across. But putting it out there does actually open up something really intriguing because it's a hard thing to talk about if unprompted. And I guess that's where my own frustration came in because I would be sitting in therapy and I would have these different therapists. I mean, I have to admit, I think I'm a really difficult client in therapy because I actually want quite a lot, but that's been hard to talk about. It's been easier to just kind of kick off and be frustrated and grumpy and difficult. But I'd be waiting to have permission to discuss certain things and then that didn't happen. Power is one of them. And I think it can be easier to talk about empowerment than power. Like if we're empowered, it's just such a little adjustment with letters, but it makes such a difference because empowerment, it's kind of reclaiming something about our own modest lives. Power, on the other hand, is a little bit aggressive and tends to involve other people and not just having power over your own life, but maybe having power over other people and having reach and impact. And that can be really terrible. It can also be really wonderful, but it's worth thinking about. So, yeah, I think that all of us go through different longings, whether or not we kind of feel comfortable about that or not, but it's in all of us. Creativity is another one where I think it's universal, and I think that we're born with a kind of creative impulse, and as children we know how to play, but we shut it down.
Yeah, completely. God, yeah, the power aspect. You're completely right. It's just been associated with so many negative connotations, especially in terms of sort of politics and things like that. So,
Oh,
you know,
yeah, that was instantly where my mind went. Yeah, we think of
oh yeah,
dictators and terrible tantruming politicians.
absolutely. And so it makes total sense that people were like, I don't want to be associated with this at all. So it was really nice to see that sort of slight change in calling it empowerment rather than power, which I think people are far more sort of engaged with rather than power. So, and the other aspect I thought was really interesting, especially I think it was one of the last sort of cases that you brought up, which was this kind of self-destructive quality of human beings. And I was
Mm,
like, so why are human beings so self-destructive, even though we're also trying to preserve ourselves? And we're
mm.
constantly trying to procreate so we can keep going on, and yet we have this very self-destructive nature of us. And I know you mentioned some aspects of why this may be the case, but I just wanted to hear from you as well.
I think that we get in our own way, and pleasure and pain are very closely linked. So we can be destructive and hurtful to people we care about as well. So that kind of ambivalence plays outwardly and inwardly. And I think that we we are conflicted about kind of seeking life and then seeking something darker. And we do have this darkness. I think destruction can also be part of creation. So again, you see it with children when they knock down blocks and they destroy something. And that is part of the playing process, it's part of building. And I think that we can be that way as human beings. Like if we embrace our shadow side, it doesn't mean we have to act out. We, we wouldn't do very well if we acted out every single shadowy longing. But I think that when we can make space for our destructive side, there's something that's very rich and illuminating about it as well, because we're not entirely good, but we can also accept and make space for all that we are. And then we have options. And I think there are different reasons we can be self destructive. Sometimes it's self esteem. Sometimes it's that we think we don't actually deserve to enjoy ourselves. And we're more familiar and comfortable with stories that are hurtful and restrictive and limiting. So that can really play out in huge ways where we get in our own way because we just don't think that we're allowed to have things go well. Even if we think that we want success, it's really hard. It's really hard, and it's really kind of intimidating and daunting to then experience success or experience a healthy
Mm.
relationship. And sometimes we are just more comfortable struggling, even if we would like to stop struggling.
Yeah, 100%. It is so true that I think you did mention the should. I think it was yeah, almost the should fairy keeps coming around and sprinkling their dust on everyone, which is
Yes.
very annoying. And so no, yeah, I totally agree. We are completely like bound by this should fairy at the moment, and it would be good to start
Mm.
getting away from it, really. And so, Charlotte, like, huge thanks for speaking with me today. I really appreciate it. Your book is
Oh, well,
awesome.
thank you so much. It's wonderful speaking with you. And yeah, allowing for emotional freedom is definitely a way forward. So I I love conversations like this where surprising things can emerge as well.
100%. And hopefully, someone else out there will listen and also be ready to start desiring and not be afraid of that. So, yes.
Yes, and don't wait. I mean, my case studies are stories about people who sometimes wait too long, and actually just ask yourself now.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.